Hi everyone! I haven't made a video for ages and ages, but I've seen a few TikToks on this Hebrew phrase, Ezer Kenegdo, recently, and people have been sending it to me. And there's been a lot of discussion around what the correct translation of this phrase is. In the Old Testament, in Genesis or Bereshit, in the Hebrew Bible, chapter 2 verse 18, it uses this phrase when it's talking about God wanting to create what has been translated as helpmeet for Adam, the lone human in the Garden of Eden. Now obviously the term helpmeet has been understood for a long time to mean, or has been sort of interpreted as somebody who's potentially lower in status, who's just there as an assistant, etc., etc. So obviously there's a lot of interest and motivation for modern women to really understand what it was that God meant by using this phrase as a Kenegdo to refer to his creation of woman in relation to his creation of Adam in the Garden of Eden. Now, as an interesting side note, the term Adam, I think I did a video on this before, really means human as opposed to male. When he says later on, male and female created he them, the word for male is not Adam. So the term Adam just comes from Adama, meaning made from the ground. It's just referring to the creation of a human being. Now there's very deep doctrine associated with all of that, but I'm not going to go into that because the focus of this video is this term Ezer Kenegdo. So the word Ezer, it is true that in modern Hebrew, if you use that word, it would mean just a helper. And in any context. So it could be used in lots of different contexts to describe people or somebody who's giving assistance to another person. However, in the Old Testament, this word is used almost exclusively. It's a phrase it's a word that comes up quite a bit, but almost exclusively when it is referring to God giving assistance to his people. So it's more used to refer to divine assistance as opposed to just any kind of random help. Almost exclusively the context that this word is used in is referring to divine aid or the help of a stronger military power coming in to assist Israel in defense against its enemies. So it's almost exclusively referring to either godly assistance or the assistance of a superior force to aid Israel. So of course this gives weight to the argument that when God was referring to creation of the woman as being a helper, that gives the idea that perhaps he was really elevating the status of women to be aligned with being similar to the help of God or divine aid or the help of a stronger force to help something that was weaker, the man being weaker. Arguments against this interpretation say that just because the word Ezer is used in that context does not mean that the word Ezer itself means stronger or divine or anything like that kind of help. So that's a fair argument that just because Ezer is used in that context doesn't necessarily mean that it always means a superior being or force coming to aid. So what I thought I would do in terms of contributing to the discussion was to look at like I like to do in my videos, to look at the original pictographs of these letters and see what picture that actually paints for us. We'll look at Kenegdo in a minute, but I'm just going to give myself a little bit of space here because I found that looking at the pictographs, the original ancient pictographs where these words, came from, really gives so much insight into what the ancient Hebrews probably understood these words to mean. because obviously they were, these words had come more recently from the pictographs in those times than in modern days. With a lot of the modern Hebrew has lost all connection with its ancient roots. So if we just look at these letters by themselves, ayin, originally the pictograph was an eye, and I've done videos on this before, and it's specifically, you can hear it in the word itself, ayin. There's the eye, but it was more like the third eye. I don't know if all of you are familiar with that concept from like Eastern religions, but the idea is the single eye, the eye of wisdom, the eye of spiritual insight, as opposed to our physical eyes. Spiritual insight. So we'll leave that as our definition of what the pictograph, ayin, represented. This Zion was originally a tool. You can just you can kind of see that it was like once, it was just a image for a tool. All right, so we've got something that's used as a tool, and then we've got resh, which was originally a head. So here's a person looking this direction. Okay, and it used to indicate something that was the head of, or the top of, or the highest, or the first. Now in Hebrew, the adjective describing a noun goes after the noun. Not like we tend to put the adjectives before the noun when we're just describing something. But for Hebrew, so this would be the adjectival term here, and this would be the noun. So we've got really the highest tool of spiritual insight would have meant what would have been closest to what the original word Ezer meant if you're just going with the pictographs. The highest, or the first, or the top, or the head tool for spiritual insight. So when God was referring to his, wanting to create a help and for man, he wasn't just giving something that was just going to be a bit useful, like something, somebody that was going to like wash his clothes or, make his food, stuff that he could probably do for himself if he just got his act together. We're talking about being given a tool, the highest tool for spiritual insight. Now this works really well if you're using Ezer and you're realizing that this word was used in connection with God, the kind of assistance that God would give, the kind of assistance that a stronger military force or wiser group of people might give to people who are in trouble. So this was the kind of tool that woman was supposed to be for man. And if we look at Kenegdo, this word now, this really reinforces this idea even more in an incredible way. So we'll leave off talking about Ezer for a second. Oh, just for some context, you will have heard the term Ezer in the song Come Thou Fount. Here I raise my Ebenezer. This is actually two words. Maybe I should hyphenate it. And that phrase, Ebenezer, comes from the phrase I think it's in Corinthians, when the prophet Samuel, the house of Israel the armies of Israel had successfully defeated the Philistines after being defeated by them a few times, and they finally defeated the Philistines, and he puts a stone of monument in the place of their victory, and he says it's a monument to what's pronounced Even Ha'ezer, which means the stone of help. And he's specifically referring to the stone, meaning the God, like the rock, of help. So there's just one context where Ezer was use that you might have heard before. Here I raise mine, Ebenezer, what's the rest of it? To thy, for thy great help, here I come, or something like that. So it's, anyway, you can hear it in that song. All right, so let's look at Kenegdo. Let's look at Kenegdo. So in various translations of the Old Testament, Kenegdo is, we're most familiar with it being translated as meat, and I actually have decided I quite like that translation. But sometimes it's corresponding to or appropriate for Adam, like the idea of being given a help that was appropriate for him. So let's just look at what it actually means. So this, let's go back to the pictographs. We've got this calf is an open palm. So I like to think of this is not the explanations I've heard from some other people who have been looking at this, but I like to think of this. The word in Hebrew, the word ki, means because. So, or can be as, I suppose. So to me, it's like when you're like standing with an open palm, it's like you're sort of explaining something. You're opening something up to somebody, like you're showing them something. So just remember that we're looking at Ezer as meaning a tool of spiritual insight, showing. Now this word here, neged, this is a very interesting term. Literally, it means something that's opposing something. So standing in opposition to something can also mean standing before, like in front of something. It means both of them. So standing in opposition and like before. So it's kind of like, if you can imagine, it really evokes this image of two things. Oh my goodness, that's supposed to be a person. It does not look like a person. Yeah. It's really hard to draw and hold the camera at the same time. Okay, so two people, if they're facing each other, right? So they are standing literally, like, you could say they're opposing each other in terms of like their physical position to one another. They're standing before and opposing each other. So I think that this word meat actually describes this word neged really well. If you meet somebody, you're going to be standing in front of them, facing them, looking them in the eye. So it denotes equality of position, but it also gives an idea of a mirroring position. Now, if you think about a mirror always reflects what? It doesn't reflect what is there. It reflects the opposite of what is there. So, if you're looking in the mirror and something looks like it's on your right, in the mirror, it's actually, if it looks like it's on the left of the person in the mirror, it's actually on your right. You know what I mean? So what's in the mirror is actually like showing an opposing image of what is facing the mirror. So and to give some credence to this metaphor of like Eve being placed as like a mirror before Adam, in the old Talmudic text, several rabbis did actually give their interpretation of this phrase, this term Kenegdo, as meaning that woman was given as a reflection to man so that he might be able to see through his relationship with the woman and the responses of the woman himself. So they were saying woman was given to man to show him how he was doing. And if he was moving away from God, he would see that reflected in his relationship with the woman. And the woman was there to show him, and literally as a tool of spiritual insight, to show the man how he was doing. If there's nobody there to pick a guy up and say, hey, you know what, I think maybe you need to like do this a bit better, or maybe, and as as wives, we're really great at that, right? We are known for that, right? Little nitpicky. But according to this ancient original Hebrew interpretation of Ezer Kenegdo. That was our role. We were literally given to man to help him see himself better, because without our help, he wouldn't be able to do that. Now, this little O, vav at the end here, that's a vav, the letter, that's just referring to, it just means that this is being given to a man. That's like a masculine indicative letter, just at the end of a word, it just means, so it'd be like Ezer Kenegdo, for him, for a man. So this is for a man, being given to a man. So we don't really have to worry too much about that letter. But so we've got a tool of spirit, the highest tool of spiritual insight, given to by way of explanation and opening up. It's an open palm, and standing before and in opposition to man, to help him see how he is doing, to help him, not help him in terms of like getting out into the field and like doing all the work for him and making his clothes and making his food. That was not what it was about. We were given as an equal partner, standing, facing eye to eye with a man, mirroring a man, so that he might be able to spiritually progress and see himself and how he is doing in terms of his relationship to God. And I think as women, this is like, it's like actually being given a role that's like the highest honor. It's a phrase, is a phrase that was often given to God, a title given to God, given to superior help, given to the highest form of help that anyone could be given. So there is nothing inferior or less about this role. There is nothing second class about this role. There is nothing about subservience or slavery indicative in this phrase. As a Kenegdo, I think it's something that every Christian woman and women in general need to understand, that we were literally given as a source of spiritual guidance for man, so that he could find his way back to God. And that's the end.